Welcome back to the Gentleman's Gazette in our series on Rolex watches. Today, I'll discuss 7 reasons why I would never buy a Rolex watch, and maybe one exception. A Rolex wristwatch tops the wish list of many men, but you might be surprised that personally, even though I admire the history of the company and what they've done with it, I'm not one of those men. We already published a video about is it worth it Rolex watches, and in it we argue the pros and cons, and overall it seems like Rolex can be worth the money. So if I think it's worth it, why do I then decide not to buy one? Well, there are many reasons, specifically 7. So number 1 is Rolex charges a lot for the brand, not necessarily for the quality. In my opinion, the Rolex brand is too much of what I would be paying for that watch. The value used Rolex watches yield in the marketplace is mostly related to supply and demand, not because the watches are inherently superior to their competitors. Now don't get me wrong, Rolex makes good watches that are robust, that don't need much maintenance, and that hold their value if you get the right model. But a Rolex is no more reliable, no more technologically interesting, or no more comfortable than other watch brands on the market that cost a lot less. If you take a closer look of the retail price development of Rolex watches, you can clearly see that it far outpaces the rate of inflation. Let's say a Submariner no date that you bought 10 years ago for about $3,800 today retails for $7,500. That's almost twice the price. Now, if you look at the product, it remains virtually the same. There are very slight changes mechanically, everything is the same. So you're paying twice as much, not because the product has improved, but simply because the brand is more valuable now. The second reason I'm not attracted to Rolex is that at the end of the day, it is a mass market product, and I prefer unique artisanal products. One of the reasons I'm so infatuated with classic men's style is that even though you can take similar or even same items, you can put your own spin on things and create your own unique style. Whenever I have the choice between a good mass market product and a good artisanal product, I choose the artisanal product 99% of the time. Also, a luxury product, by definition, becomes luxurious because it is somewhat unique and limited. If everyone has a Rolex, it's not a luxury product anymore. I'd say my style is very different from most other men, so why shouldn't I also have a wristwatch that is different from other men's style? As you know, the style of Rolex watches has changed very little throughout the decades, so they produce 800,000 watches a year, every year, all of which look mostly the same. On top of that, look at all the fakes that are out there in the marketplace that again look the same. You realize that it is a mass market product with millions of watches that all look very, very similar to one another. Personally, I don't want to spend thousands of dollars just to have something that is basically what everyone else out there has as well. So even though Rolexes are the archetype of a nice watch, I personally don't want to spend thousands of dollars just to keep up with the Joneses and have the same watch. The third reason I'm having a hard time falling in love with Rolex is that I love vintage goods, but vintage Rolexes can be very tricky because there's so many fakes out there. I'm a big fan of vintage items for many reasons. One of them is that just by nature, they're often unique items because they're no longer produced. The original items maybe have been worn out or were destroyed, so what's left is naturally a limited edition. Also, back in the day, things were often made to last, whereas today, things are designed to break 3 days after the warranty expires. Because of those reasons, I still buy a lot of things vintage, even though I can afford to buy the new version of it. Surprise, I feel the same way about watches. I have a few of them, most of them are vintage, and I enjoy them. I mean, just look at the Reverso. It's much smaller than most watches are today, yet I find it attractive on my wrist. I can wear it casually because the heritage is a polo watch, meaning it was used on the polo field. That's why you could flip it around so you wouldn't destroy your glass. At the same time, it has a black dial, so I can wear it in the evening with a tuxedo or with a suit, and I like the dial of it. I've never seen anyone like it in an old vintage reverso. Because most of them are now gone, it's probably even rarer than most limited editions out there. I bought it for a little over $1,000. I could probably sell it for more because I got a good deal, but overall I enjoy wearing it and I like the look. Rolex watches are aggressively counterfeited around the world. The fakes are produced in such big numbers that the quality of them is actually rather good, even at a much lower price point. There's also a lot of OEM parts, meaning parts that are exactly like the original part, but they're not original Rolex. And when you repair a watch or service it, they can be put in there. When you buy from a vintage dealer, they have a reputation on the line, which is good because they don't want to sell you fakes, otherwise they lose their business and they're not interested in that. At the same time, they buy watches from wholesalers. They come without box and papers sometimes, and maybe that watch was serviced at one point in time by a non-authorized Rolex dealers who put in parts that are exactly the same in the shape, but they're not authentic Rolex parts. So maybe if you want to resell it one day, it'll be marked as being partially fake. Or there are all these risks involved with buying vintage Rolexes that you have to keep in mind. Even if it's a reputable seller, maybe there's a part in there that is not original and authentic. If you truly want to buy an original Rolex, you have to buy it new, which comes with a high retail price ticket. The fifth reason I'm not really into Rolex is because of their popular styles and how they are not in line with my style. As outlined in our Is It Worth It videos, the popular Rolexes that hold their value are the sports or professional models. My style is more formal and more dressed up than most men out there, and because of that, I prefer dress watches. Now, Rolex has a dress watch line, which is not so well known, but it's called Cellini. It today starts at over $15,000 from a retail price point, which is much higher than many of their sports models, which usually sell for $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 or $10,000. But they're made out of gold, and because gold is so much more expensive, the retail price is higher. However, if you buy those watches vintage, they're not faked as often because they're less desirable. And at the same time, you can pick them up at $3,000, $4,000. Personally, I find sometimes their looks can be very dated depending on the decade they were produced in, but they also have very classic watches in their lineup. And if I would ever buy a Rolex, it would most likely be a Cellini watch that is very classic, that is gold, that I can wear with a tuxedo or with other things. It's just much more my style because they're smaller, they're slimmer, and they're more elegant in my opinion than a stainless steel sports watch. The sixth reason I'm not interested in buying a Rolex is that I don't need to impress anybody. As you know, I run my own business, the Gentleman's Gazette website, and the Fort Belvedere retail e-commerce accessories. I'm not doing million-dollar sales deals in boardrooms across corporate America, but if I was doing that, I think I would strongly consider buying a Rolex watch because it can indicate success and it can signal to the other person this guy is serious. As such, it's more part of a uniform than an expression of personal style. On the other hand, I have an online and offline track record that is very public. People can see that I'm really into men's clothing. They can see that we have happy customers, so I don't need to prove anything to anybody with the watch I'm wearing. Last but not least, I wouldn't buy a Rolex because at the end of the day, I'm not head over heels into watches. If you know me, you know that I'm truly passionate about a lot of things. However, watches is not one of them. For example, if I drive a fast car, I feel very emotionally attached to it. I feel alive. When I see a nice watch, I like the look of it, but emotionally, it leaves me cold. I mean, I honestly like the look of certain watches, right? I like the Reverso, I like the Tank Americain, I like the Royal Oak, I like the Patek Philippe Calatrava, or some watches from A. Lange & Söhne. However, when push comes to shove, and I have to decide to put money down to buy that watch, I decide to spend my money on other things, even though I could afford to buy that watch. For example, personally, I prefer cufflinks and rings over watches. And I know many men don't, but I do. They're collectible, they're a lot less expensive, they're more unique. And if you want to check out my collections of rings and cufflinks, have a look here. Now, rings and cufflinks are an accessory, an object, just like a watch. So emotionally, they're not as exciting as driving a fast car and feeling the acceleration and the braking. At the same time, I would say I still like cufflinks and rings more than a watch. Frankly, I often struggle to remember to put on my watch because it's just not natural to me. I like to have my wrist free of any weight, even though I know that if I would wear a wristwatch every day, I would probably become used to the weight and it would be second nature. However, I'm not at that point yet because I simply don't wear them often enough. So in conclusion, I would not buy a Rolex because A, it is not my style, B, I don't really care for the design that much, and C, it is simply too expensive and I'd rather spend my money on other things. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, basically, I want you to know that just because the world around you loves Rolex doesn't mean you need to have one if it's not your style or you just don't like the look of it. Conversely, just because a lot of other men like Rolexes doesn't mean you can't like it too. We at Gentleman's Gazette truly believe that big purchases of this nature should be more about staying true to yourself, especially considering all that marketing hype around watches that's out there right now. If you know Brock from The Modest Man, he did a video about buying his first Rolex recently. And at the end of the video, he mentioned that no one ever called him out on his Rolex, and he thinks that he didn't even notice it. At the same time, he seems very happy with his investment because he likes the look of it and it makes him feel good. If that's you, then by all means, go out and buy that Rolex. For me, it's just not that big of a deal, and I like other watches more, and in particular, I like other things more than watches. In today's video, I'm wearing a Rolex GMT Master with a blue and red dial and a black face in stainless steel. I also chose cufflinks in lapis lazuli with sterling silver and a carnelian in sterling silver because they're red and blue, so it works well and is consistent with my watch. My jacket is a double-breasted petrol blue fresco jacket that is part of a suit. Here I'm wearing it with a pair of dark brown and white seersuckers and a woven leather pair of penny loafers. It's a very summery combination, and because of that I added a white shirt with a knit tie in a mottled gray, which is from Fort Belvedere, and you can find it in our shop here, just like the white Italian linen pocket squares with hand-stitched or embroidered little dots, which works well with my outfit. It picks up the white of the shirt as well as the blue of the GMT Master and my cufflink.